The mafia boss hated Christmas until a broke single mother put the wrong gift under his tree. The city of Harborview in early December was a study in deception. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite atop the Vescari Tower, the sprawling metropolis looked like a jewelry box overturned on black velvet. Strings of amber and diamond-white lights choked the avenues, wrapping around lampposts and draping across the facades of historic brownstones. To the average citizen walking the slush-covered sidewalks below, the display was festive, a sign of holiday spirit and community cheer. To Adrian Vescari, it was nothing more than overhead lighting for a stage play he had no interest in watching. Adrian stood with one hand in the pocket of his tailored charcoal trousers, his other hand swirling a glass of amber whiskey that cost more than most people in this city earned in a month. He stared down at the streets, his reflection ghostly in the glass. He had a face carved from stone, sharp-jawed and unyielding, with eyes the color of a winter sea just before a storm. "Make sure the lights are up," he had told his capo 3 days ago. "Every building we own. Make them bright." He did not give the order because he cared about Christmas. He gave it because darkness drew attention. And in his line of work, blending in was the greatest defense. People expected the holidays. They expected the Vescari legitimate holdings to participate in the pageantry. So he gave them their lights. He gave them the illusion of normalcy, while he remained up here, sealed away in a penthouse that was temperature-controlled, soundproofed, and utterly devoid of warmth. The ice in his glass clinked, the sound sharp in the silence of the apartment. Adrian took a sip, the burn of the alcohol doing little to chase away the chill that settled in his bones every time the calendar turned to the 12th month. He closed his eyes, and for a terrifying second, the smell of expensive leather and pine was replaced by the scent of gunpowder and copper. The memory was always waiting, lurking behind the festive veneer of the season. It was Christmas Eve, 15 years ago. The snow had been falling in thick, soft flakes, covering the grime of the city in a pristine white sheet. He had been 18, arrogant and sure of his father's invincibility. His younger brother, Leo, had been 12. They had just stepped out of midnight mass, the heavy oak doors of the cathedral closing behind them. Leo had been laughing, trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue, his breath puffing out in white clouds. Then came the sound, not a pop, but a crack like thunder splintering the earth. Adrian remembered the way the world tilted. He remembered the shout from his father, a sound of pure animal protective instinct. Before the chaos erupted, a black sedan screeched by. Muzzle flashes lit up the holy night brighter than the star of Bethlehem. When the silence returned, it was heavy and ringing. The snow on the church steps was no longer white. It was stained a deep, horrifying crimson. Adrian had crawled across the ice, his knees scraping raw until he reached them. His father was gone instantly, but Leo was still breathing. Small, quick gasps that misted in the freezing air. Adrian had pulled his little brother into his lap, ignoring the blood soaking his own coat. He sat beneath the massive fir tree the church had set up in the courtyard, its colorful bulbs casting a grotesque, cheerful glow over the dying boy. "I am cold," Adrian, Leo had whispered. Adrian had held him tighter, rocking him, begging him to stay, promising him gifts, promising him the world, promising him anything if he would just keep his eyes open. But the light faded from Leo's eyes while the Christmas lights kept twinkling, indifferent and cruel. Adrian opened his eyes in the penthouse, his grip on the whiskey glass so tight his knuckles were white. That was what Christmas was. It was not joy. It was not peace. It was a distraction. It was the anniversary of the moment he realized that no amount of power could stop death. He turned his back on the window and the glowing city. The living room was vast, dominated by a 12-foot spruce tree that his interior designer had installed that morning. It was decorated in tasteful silver and blue, perfectly symmetrical, utterly soulless. It was a prop, just like the smile he wore at board meetings. "I hate this time of year," he thought, draining the glass, 3 miles and a world away from the Vescari penthouse. Nora Lane was trying to negotiate with a radiator that hissed more than it heated. The apartment was small, a fourth-floor walk-up with peeling paint and drafty windows that rattled every time the wind whipped off the harbor. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper, a clean but tired scent. Nora sat at the chipped kitchen table, her phone in one hand and a stack of envelopes in the other. She wore her waitress uniform from the diner, a pale blue dress that had seen too many wash cycles, paired with thick wool socks. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, escaping in wisps around a face that was undeniably beautiful but etched with exhaustion. She tapped the banking app on her screen. The numbers stared back at her. $42.15. She let out a long, slow breath, rubbing her temples. Rent was due in 5 days. The electric bill was overdue, marked with threatening red letters. And then there was the pharmacy. Emma's inhaler was running low, and the rattling sound in her daughter's chest the last 2 nights had kept Nora awake, staring at the ceiling and doing frantic mental math. "Mama?" Nora shoved the bills under a flyer for a grocery store sale and plastered a bright smile on her face before turning around. Emma stood in the doorway of the bedroom, holding a pair of safety scissors and a sheet of white printer paper. She was 6 years old, with eyes as big and brown as a fawn's and a spirit that poverty had not yet managed to crush. She wore pajamas that were slightly too short at the ankles. "Hey, Sweet Pea," Nora said, her voice softening instantly. "You should be asleep. It is past 8. "I am making snow," Emma announced seriously, holding up a jaggedly cut snowflake. "For the tree. Since we do not have real snow yet." Nora's heart squeezed. She stood up and walked over, scooping her daughter into a hug. Emma felt thin in her arms, fragile. Nora kissed the top of her head, smelling strawberry shampoo and sleep. "It is beautiful," Nora said. "The best snowflake I've ever seen. Go put it on the tree and then it is straight to bed. I have to leave for my cleaning shift soon." Emma ran to the corner of the living room where a 2-foot plastic tree stood on a crate covered by a red sheet. Nora had bought it at a thrift store for $3. It leaned slightly to the left, but Emma treated it like it was the tree at Rockefeller Center. She placed the paper snowflake carefully on a branch, next to a garland made of popcorn they had strung together 2 nights ago. She turned back to Nora, her expression suddenly worried. "Mama," she said, "since we live on the 4th floor now and we do not have a chimney, how will Santa get in?" Nora felt the familiar pinch of panic. She crouched down so she was eye level with her daughter. "Santa is magic. She said, smoothing Emma's hair. "He has a master key that opens every door in the world, even ours. Especially ours." Emma's face relaxed. Her trust absolute. "Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I do not need a lot, but I really hope he brings the princess book." "The one with the dragon. He knows," Nora said, her throat tight. "He knows exactly what you want," after she tucked Emma in and listened to her breathing even out. Nora returned to the kitchen table. She sat in the dim light, the silence of the apartment pressing in on her. She pulled a small box from her bag. It contained a plain silver charm bracelet she had found at a pawn shop. It was cheap metal, likely to tarnish if she did not polish it, but it was delicate. She took out a small set of paints and a wooden disc she had sanded smooth. With a steady hand, she began to paint. Tiny. Swirling letters. EMMA. She added little holly berries around the edge. It was not professional, but it was made with a ferocity of love that made her fingers ache. Next, she pulled out a second-hand copy of The Princess and the Dragon. She had found it in a bargain bin, the cover slightly bent, but she had carefully glued it back down and wiped it clean. She opened a piece of lined notebook paper and clicked her pen. "My darling Emma, Christmas is not about the things we buy. It is about the magic we make. I know this year has been hard and the house is different, but my love for you is the biggest thing in the universe. I will always find a way for us. I promise. You are my greatest gift. Love, Mama." She folded the letter, her tears blurring the ink slightly. She wiped her eyes angrily. Crying would not pay the rent. Crying would not buy the inhaler. She had to get to her second job. The Vescari Tower was a fortress of glass and steel that pierced the night sky. Nora entered through the service entrance, Flashing her badge to the security guard, she changed from her diner uniform into the gray scrubs provided by the cleaning agency. Her assignment tonight was the 40th through the 45th floors. Luxury suites. The air in the hallways smelled of expensive sanitizer and money. As she pushed her cart toward the service elevator, she passed the front desk. The concierge, a kind older man named Mr. Henderson, waved her over. "Nora, wait a minute," he called out. Nora paused, gripping the handle of her cart. She felt a spike of anxiety. Had she missed a spot last time? Was she being let go? "Mr. Henderson reached under the marble counter and pulled out a silver gift bag with a red ribbon. "The building management is doing a secret Santa for the staff and the struggling families in the neighborhood," he said gently. "We had a few extra donation kits left over. I want you to take one." Nora's face flushed hot. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, conscious of the frayed cuffs. "Oh, Mr. Henderson, I could not. I am fine. Really." "Nora," he said, his voice firm but kind, "it is just some basics, a warm scarf, some chocolates, a gift card for the grocery store. Please, for the little one, just in case." Nora looked at the bag, a grocery store gift card. That could mean milk, eggs, maybe even a small treat for Christmas dinner instead of pasta again. She swallowed her pride, which tasted like ash in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." She took the silver bag and tucked it onto the bottom shelf of her cart, hidden beneath the cleaning rags. That night, back in the quiet apartment, Nora sat on the floor surrounded by the few supplies she had. She had the silver bag from Mr. Henderson, which she had peeked into, a thick wool scarf, a box of truffles, and a $50 grocery card. It was generous, incredibly so. But she also had the gifts for Emma, the bracelet, the book, the ornament, and the letter. She had only one roll of wrapping paper left, a glossy silver foil she had bought on clearance last January. She wrapped Emma's gifts carefully, placing them inside a small gift bag she had saved from a birthday party years ago. It happened to be silver, nearly identical in shade to the one Mr. Henderson had given her. She looked at the two bags sitting side by side on the table. They looked like twins. "I need to take the charity gift back," she thought. She had decided on the bus ride home. She could not keep the scarf and the chocolates. The gift card she would keep. She had to, for food. But the rest felt like taking too much. She would rewrap the scarf and the chocolates and leave them at the staff tree in the lobby tomorrow for someone who had absolutely nothing. She would put a generic Merry Christmas tag on it. She wrote out the tag for Emma's bag. "To Emma, love Mama." She tucked the letter inside. She wrote the tag for the charity bag. "For a friend." She was so tired, her eyes burned. She left the bags on the table and collapsed into bed, fully clothed, setting her alarm for 5 in the morning. The next day was a blur of panic. The alarm did not go off. Nora woke up with 20 minutes to get Emma to school and get herself to the morning shift at the diner, then back to the high-rise for an extra holiday shift she had picked up. She flew around the apartment, shoving toast into Emma's hand and grabbing her coat. "The bags," she gasped. She grabbed both silver bags from the table. She would drop the charity one at the building's staff tree when she got to work, and she would bring Emma's bag back home tonight to put under their tiny tree. Nora dropped Emma at school, kissing her forehead through the chain-link fence. "Be good, I love you." She ran for the bus, the two silver bags banging against her hip. 8 hours later, Nora was clocking in at the Vascari Tower. She was exhausted, her feet throbbing, her mind a fog of fatigue. She changed into her scrubs, transferring her personal items into her locker. She kept the two bags with her. She needed to drop the charity one at the front desk tree, but the lobby was crowded with delivery men and residents. She panicked, not wanting to be seen carrying personal items in the main area. "I will take them up on the cart," she decided. "I will drop the charity one down the laundry chute to the basement staff room later, and I will hide Emma's in my locker when the coast is clear." She loaded her cleaning cart, towels, spray bottles, mop. She placed the two silver bags on the top shelf, right next to each other. The elevator ride to the penthouse floor was silent. Nora leaned her head against the cool metal wall, closing her eyes for just a second. Ding. The doors opened to the service corridor of the penthouse level. This was Adrian Vascari's floor. The air up here was different, still, pressurized, silent. Nora pushed her cart out. She saw a porter, a young man named Steve who always had headphones in, rushing toward the service elevator she had just exited. He was pushing a large trolley full of packages. "Hey, Nora!" Steve shouted over his music. "Boss wants all the gifts under the tree before he gets back. He's coming in early." Nora froze. "The gifts? Yeah, anything that looks like a present. Just dump it and go. He's in a mood." Steve rushed past her into the elevator. Nora looked at her cart. She had to clean the guest bathroom in the hallway before she could go inside the main suite. She grabbed her spray bottle and a rag. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was the school nurse. "Emma has a slight fever. Not an emergency, but monitor her tonight." Nora's heart stopped. Fever meant asthma triggers. She typed a frantic reply with trembling fingers. In her distraction, she reached for the silver bag on her cart, the one she intended to keep safe, the one with Emma's bracelet and the letter. But her eyes were on the phone screen. She grabbed the bag on the left. She hurried into the service entrance of the penthouse. The living room was massive, dimly lit, terrifyingly beautiful. The tree stood like a sentinel in the corner. Beneath it lay a pile of professionally wrapped boxes, gold, black, navy blue, cold colors. Nora rushed over, her heart hammering in her chest, worried about Emma, worried about being caught by the mafia boss. She placed the silver bag nestled among the expensive boxes. It looked small and humble next to them. She turned and ran back out to her cart to finish her shift, her mind entirely on her sick daughter, back in the hallway, on the top shelf of her cart. The bag containing the wool scarf and the chocolates sat quietly. Nora finished her shift in a haze. She grabbed the remaining bag from her cart, shoved it into her oversized tote bag, and clocked out. She ran all the way to the bus stop, clutching the bag she believed contained the generic charity items, desperate to get home to her feverish child. In the penthouse, the silence was absolute. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the marble floor. The city lights flickered on, one by one, surrounding the tower in a cage of electricity. Under the towering spruce tree, amidst the gifts of scotch, silk ties, and humidors sent by senators and crime lords, sat a small, crumpled silver bag. Inside it was a cheap bracelet, a painted piece of wood, and a letter that carried the weight of a mother's entire world. The elevator chimed. Heavy footsteps echoed on the floor. Adrian Vascari was home, and he was not in the mood for surprises. The meeting with the Calvetti crew had been a waste of time, a 3-hour circling of sharks in a back room filled with cigar smoke and veiled threats. Adrian Vascari stepped out of the private elevator and into his penthouse, shrugging off his suit jacket with a motion that suggested he wanted to shed his own skin along with it. He tossed the jacket onto a leather armchair and loosened his tie, the silk slipping through his fingers like water. The air in the penthouse was cool, filtered, and aggressively silent. It smelled of winter pine and sandalwood, a scent that was not natural but curated. He had not chosen the candles flickering on the mantel, nor had he chosen the enormous spruce tree that dominated the eastern corner of the room, its branches heavy with silver globes and crystal icicles. His staff had arranged it all. They knew better than to ask him, so they simply did what was expected for a man of his stature. Adrian walked to the wet bar and poured himself a glass of water, ignoring the whiskey decanter. He needed a clear head. The Calvettis were pushing boundaries in the shipping district, testing the fences. He would need to push back, hard and fast, before the new year. He turned, glass in hand, and his gaze landed on the tree. Beneath the boughs lay a mountain of gifts. They were wrapped in heavy, textured papers, midnight blue, burnished gold, matte black. They were gifts from city councilmen, rival bosses looking to curry favor, and business partners terrified of offending him. He knew what was inside them without looking. Humidors, rare scotches, fountain pens that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. They were not gifts. They were tributes. He scoffed, a harsh sound in the empty room, and moved to walk past the display to his office. Then he stopped. Something was wrong with the picture. Adrian was a man who survived by noticing details, a hesitation in a handshake, a glance toward a door, a discrepancy in a ledger. Now, his eyes narrowed on the base of the tree. Nestled between a box wrapped in gold foil and a basket of imported wines was a small, crumpled silver bag. It was pathetic looking. The tissue paper sticking out of the top was wrinkled, and the bag itself had a crease down the side, as if it had been reused. It did not belong. It was a blemish on the perfect sterile symmetry of his life. Adrian stepped closer, his irritation spiking. He paid his household staff exceptional wages to ensure perfection. This was sloppy. He crouched down, setting his water glass on a side table, and plucked the offending bag from the pile. It was light. He noticed the gift tag attached to the handle with a piece of curling ribbon. To Emma, love Mama. The handwriting was not professional calligraphy. It was hurried, looped, and intimate. Adrian frowned. Who was Emma? He did not know an Emma. He certainly did not know a mama who would leave a bag like this in the most secure residence in Harborview. Curiosity warred with his paranoia. Was this a joke, a delivery error, or something more sinister? In his world, even a harmless package could contain a biohazard or a bomb, though the weight suggested otherwise. He sat on the edge of the sofa and pulled the tissue paper aside. He reached in and pulled out the contents, one by one, laying them on the obsidian coffee table. First, a book, The Princess and the Dragon. The corners were soft and white from wear. The cover possessed a faint crease where it had been opened too many times. Second, a bracelet. It was silver-plated, the kind you could buy at a kiosk in the mall. The charms were simple hearts and stars, jangling quietly as he set it down. Third, a wooden ornament. It was hand-painted, the red paint slightly uneven. Emma was spelled out in white letters, bordered by holly leaves that looked like they had been painted with a toothpick. And finally, a folded piece of lined notebook paper. Adrian stared at the objects. They were trash. They were worthless. And yet, they carried a vibration of something he could not name, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He picked up the paper. He should throw it away. He should call security. Instead, he unfolded it. My darling Emma, Christmas is not about the things we buy. It is about the magic we make. I know this year has been hard, and the house is different, but my love for you is the biggest thing in the universe. I will always find a way for us. I promise. You are my greatest gift. Love, Mama. The words hit him like a physical blow to the sternum. Adrian stopped breathing for a moment. The silence of the penthouse suddenly felt deafening. I will always find a way. The memory clawed its way up from the dark basement of his mind where he kept it chained. He saw a flash of a church courtyard. He saw snow stained pink. He saw a small hand gripping a toy car, a red Ferrari, chipped paint, bought from a second-hand bin because it was all Adrian had been able to afford with his allowance. Look, Adrian, it goes fast. Leo's voice, clear as a bell. Leo had loved that cheap, beat-up car more than anything else he owned because his big brother had given it to him. He had died holding it. Adrian's hand clenched around the letter, crumpling the edge. A sharp, burning pressure built behind his eyes. No, he stood up abruptly, the movement violent. He shoved the memory back down, piling anger on top of it to weigh it down. He hated this. He hated that this piece of paper had slipped past his defenses. He hated that some stranger's pathetic poverty was bleeding onto his expensive marble floors. Who did this? He growled to the empty room. He snatched up his phone and dialed his head of security. Marcus, penthouse, now. 2 minutes later, Marcus, a man built like a vending machine with a crew cut, stepped out of the elevator. He took one look at Adrian's face, the tight jaw, the cold fury in the eyes, and his hand drifted instinctively toward his holster. Boss? What is it? Is there a threat? Adrian pointed a shaking finger at the table. Who put that here? Marcus looked at the storybook and the bracelet. He blinked, confused. The gift bag, sir. Do not play stupid with me. Marcus, who has been in this room? Who had access to the tree? Marcus stiffened. Just the cleaning crew, sir, and the interior design team this morning. We screened everything. Screened everything? Adrian's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. Then explain to me how a personal letter and a bag of junk ended up under my tree. Explain to me how someone got close enough to leave this without anyone noticing. Marcus paled. I will check the logs. I will pull the footage. Do it, Adrian barked. I want to know who. I want to know why. If this is a message from the Calvettis, if they are using a kid to get to me. He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Marcus pulled out his tablet, tapping furiously to access the building's internal surveillance network. Adrian paced the length of the room, his heart rate elevated. It was not fear. It was indignation. It was the feeling of being exposed. That letter was raw. It was vulnerable. It was desperate. It did not belong in his world of steel and silence. It was a contagion. 5 floors down, in the staff locker room, Nora Lane was buttoning her gray scrub top with trembling fingers. She had just arrived for her night shift. She had spent the afternoon nursing Emma's fever, wiping her forehead with cool cloths until the heat broke and Emma fell into a peaceful sleep. Nora's neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was sitting with her now. Nora had rushed to work, her mind still foggy with worry. She opened her locker, expecting to see the silver gift bag, Emma's bag, sitting where she thought she had left it. The locker was empty. She frowned. She checked her tote bag. Inside was the silver bag she had brought home, the one she thought was the charity gift. She pulled it out. She opened it. Inside was a wool scarf and a box of chocolates. Nora stared at the items, her brain refusing to compute. If the charity gift was here, then where was Emma's gift? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text from Mr. Henderson, the concierge. Nora, are you on shift yet? I have a weird question. Did you leave a personal gift upstairs by mistake? One of the security guys was asking about a bag found in the penthouse. The blood drained from Nora's face so fast she had to grab the locker door to keep from falling. The penthouse. She squeezed her eyes shut, a wave of nausea rolling over her. She remembered the rush, the text from the school nurse, the distraction. She had grabbed the wrong bag from the cart. She had left her daughter's only Christmas presents, the labor of love she had spent weeks creating, under the tree of Adrian Vascari. Oh God, she whispered. She pictured Emma waking up on Christmas morning, the empty space under the tiny tree, the disappointment in those big brown eyes. Nora had promised. She had written it in the letter. I will always find a way. And she had failed. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She shoved the charity bag back into her tote and ran out of the locker room. She sprinted to the service elevator and rode it down to the lobby. Mr. Henderson was behind the desk, sorting mail. He looked up as Nora approached, her face pale and frantic. Mr. Henderson, she gasped, leaning over the counter. The text, the bag. It is mine. It was a mix-up. I mixed them up on the cart. Mr. Henderson looked sympathetic but nervous. He lowered his voice. Nora, keep it down. The security chief called down 10 minutes ago. Mr. Vascari found it. He is not happy. I need to get it back, Nora said, her voice cracking. Please. It is everything I have from my daughter. The book, the bracelet. I cannot replace them. I have no money left. Mr. Henderson grimaced. Nora, I cannot just go up there and ask for it. It is the penthouse. You do not just knock on that door. Mr. Vascari he's a particular man. He thinks it might be a security breach. It is not a breach. It is a mistake. Nora felt tears pricking her eyes. Just call up, please. Tell them it is the cleaning lady's mistake. Tell them I am sorry. I just need the bag back. Mr. Henderson sighed, looking at her desperate face. He reached for the phone. I will try the security desk, but I am promising nothing. In the penthouse. Adrian stood behind Marcus, watching the large monitor set up in the security office adjacent to the living room. On the screen, a black and white feed showed the lobby desk. He watched the woman. She was small. dressed in the oversized gray scrubs that all the cleaning staff wore. Her hair was pulling loose from her bun. She was leaning over the desk, gesturing wildly. "Zoom in," Adrian commanded. Marcus tapped the screen. The image blurred and then sharpened on her face. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that even the grainy camera could not hide. But what struck Adrian was the terror. She was not looking around furtively like a spy or an assassin. She was looking at the concierge with pure, unadulterated desperation. She clutched her hands together. She wiped at her eyes. Adrian watched her mouth move. He could not hear the words, but he knew the shape of pleading when he saw it. "Is that her?" Adrian asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Marcus checked his log. "Yes, sir. Nora Lane. She was the cleaner assigned to this floor this afternoon. Background check is clean. Single mother, no criminal record, debt issues, but nothing suspicious." Adrian stared at the woman on the screen. She looked like a gust of wind could knock her over. And yet, this was the woman who had written that letter? This was the woman who promised to move the universe for her child? "Mr. Henderson called the security line," Marcus said, answering the blinking light on his console. "He says she is downstairs. She's asking for the bag back. She says it was a mistake, a mix-up." Adrian watched Nora on the screen. She was pacing now, hugging her arms around herself. She looked fragile. He looked back at the table where the cheap plastic bracelet lay. He felt a strange, magnetic pull. It was an itch in the center of his chest. He wanted to see her. He wanted to see if the woman matched the words. He wanted to know who dared to bring reality into his sanctuary. "Send her up," Adrian said. Marcus turned. "Surprised. Sir? You want me to bring the bag down to her?" "No," Adrian said, turning away from the screen to face the window. "Bring her up. But sir, do it, Marcus. Tell her it is about the gift." The elevator ride was the longest 3 minutes of Nora's life. She stood in the corner of the brass-paneled car, her reflection staring back at her, wide eyes, flushed cheeks, a stain on her scrub top. She clutched the empty charity gift bag in her hands, twisting the handles until her knuckles turned white. Why had he called her up? Was she going to be fired? That was the best-case scenario. The rumors about Adrian Viscari were whispered in the back alleys of the city, that he was ruthless, that he was violent, that he made people disappear if they crossed him. And she had invaded his home. She had left her poverty cluttering his floor. But she could not turn back. She thought of Emma's face when she talked about the princess book. She thought of the hours she had spent painting that ornament, her hand cramping. "I will face the devil himself if I have to," she thought. "I just want the bracelet." The elevator slowed. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Ding. The doors slid open. Nora stepped out, her legs feeling like lead. She had cleaned this apartment before, but always when it was empty, always with her head down, focusing on the dust. Now, seeing it inhabited, it felt like a temple to a dark god. The floors were black marble, reflecting the city lights from the floor-to-ceiling windows. The ceilings were impossibly high. And there, standing by the massive Christmas tree, was the man himself. Adrian Viscari was taller than she expected. He wore a fitted black shirt that outlined broad shoulders and lean muscle. His dark hair was swept back, and his face was a mask of sharp angles and shadows. He was watching her. His eyes were cold, calculating, and piercingly blue. They swept over her, taking in her worn sneakers, her messy hair, her terrified stance. Nora felt a blush rise from her chest to her hairline. She felt small. She felt poor. Adrian did not speak. He simply stood there, radiating power. Nora took a tentative step forward. Her eyes darted to the coffee table. There it was, the bag. It was open. The contents were spread out on the black stone. The book, the bracelet, the letter. He had opened it. He had seen everything. He had read her letter. Nora felt a wave of humiliation so intense it made her dizzy. Her private promise, her confession of struggle, had been laid bare for this billionaire crime lord to inspect. "Mr. Viscari," she started, her voice shaking. She cleared her throat and tried again, gripping the charity bag in front of her like a shield. "Mr. Viscari, I am so sorry. It was a mistake. I brought the wrong bag." Adrian did not move. He kept his gaze locked on hers. "You are Nora," he stated. His voice was deep, smooth, and utterly terrifying. "Yes, sir. And this—" He gestured vaguely to the table. "This is yours?" "Yes, sir. It is for my daughter, Emma." Adrian tilted his head slightly, studying her. He looked at the cheap items on the table, then back at her. The contrast between the opulent room and the humble gifts was stark. He took a step toward her. Nora suppressed the urge to run. "Why?" he asked. The question confused her. "Why what? Why did I leave it? Why did I buy it? I do not understand," she stammered. "Why bring it here?" Adrian asked, his voice lowering. "I did not mean to," she said quickly. "I was bringing the charity donation." She held up the silver bag in her hands. "This one, for the staff drive. And I had my daughter's gift with me because I was rushing. They look the same. I grabbed the wrong one. I am so sorry. I will take it and go. Please." She took another step toward the table, reaching for the bracelet. "Do not touch it," Adrian said. The command was soft, but it cracked like a whip. Nora froze, her hand hovering inches from the table. She looked up at him, fear spiking in her chest. "Sir?" Adrian walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her. He was close enough that she could smell him. Clean soap, expensive leather, and the faint, sharp scent of whiskey. He towered over her. He looked down at the letter lying on the table. "I will always find a way." He looked back at Nora. His eyes were no longer just cold. They were turbulent. "You promised her magic," he said quietly. Nora swallowed hard. "Yes." "You have nothing," he observed. His eyes dropped to her shoes, then back to her face. "You are drowning in debt." "I checked, and yet you promise her the world." Nora's chin lifted. A spark of defiance ignited in her chest, fueled by the insult. She might be poor, she might be scared, but she was a mother. "I promised her love, Mr. Viscari," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "That is not nothing." Adrian stared at her. He seemed taken aback by her tone. For a second, the mask slipped, and she saw something else in his eyes. Pain? Hunger? He reached down and picked up the letter. Nora held her breath. He read the words again, his jaw working. Then he looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Take it," he said abruptly. He gestured to the table. "Take the book. Take the bracelet." Nora let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She scrambled to gather the items, her hands shaking as she shoved the book and the bracelet back into the crumpled silver bag. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." She reached for the ornament, the wooden disc with Emma painted on it. Adrian's hand shot out and covered it. Nora froze. His hand was large, warm, and scarred across the knuckles. "Not that," he said. Nora looked up, confused. "Sir, I am keeping this," he said. He picked up the ornament, holding it by its red ribbon, dangled from his fingers, looking absurdly small against his dark shirt. "Why?" Nora asked, her confusion overriding her fear. "Collateral," Adrian said. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Collateral for what?" "To make sure you come back tomorrow," he said. Nora blinked. "Come back. I need help," he said, his voice regaining its cool. "Commanded edge. With the tree, it is incorrect. It lacks something. You are going to help me fix it. I have a shift tomorrow night," Nora stammered. "I know," Adrian said, "and you will spend it here, dealing with this." He gestured to the tree with the hand holding the ornament. Nora looked at him. She should say no. She should take the bracelet and run and never come back. This man was dangerous. He was playing a game she did not understand, but he was holding Emma's ornament. And beneath the cold command, she saw a flicker of that same loneliness she felt every night in her empty apartment. Nora straightened her spine. "Okay," she said. Adrian nodded. "Once? Good. Now get out." Nora clutched the bag to her chest and turned, walking as fast as she could without running toward the elevator. Adrian watched her go. He waited until the doors slid shut, hiding her from view. He looked down at the ornament in his hand. Emma, painted in wobbly white letters. He walked over to the massive, perfect, soulless tree. He reached up and hung the cheap wooden circle on a branch right at eye level. It swung gently, a tiny heartbeat of life in a forest of ice. Adrian Viscari touched the wood with his thumb. "Tomorrow," he whispered. The silence in the penthouse was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a diving bell deep underwater. Adrian Viscari stood by the marble coffee table, the piece of lined notebook paper in his hand. He did not look like a man who had just found a lost item. He looked like a prosecutor holding the smoking gun, or perhaps a judge weighing a soul. Nora Lane stood a few feet away, her hands gripping the handles of the empty charity gift bag until her knuckles turned the color of old bone. The air conditioning hummed, a low, artificial sound that seemed to underline the vast distance between them, not just the physical space, but the chasm between his world of tailored silk and her world of frayed wool. Adrian looked up from the paper, his eyes locking onto hers. They were blue, but not the warm blue of a summer sky. They were the blue of glacier ice, beautiful and perilous. "Tell me again," he said. His voice was calm, but it had a razor edge, a sharpness that warned her one wrong answer would cut. How did this get here? Nora swallowed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. She had already explained it, but he wanted to hear it again. He was testing her. "It was a mistake, sir," she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to steady it. "I was rushing my daughter. The school nurse texted me that she had a fever. I was distracted. I had 2 bags on my cart. They looked the same. I grabbed the wrong one." Adrian did not blink. He stepped closer, the movement fluid and predatory. "And why brings a personal gift to work? Nora? I did not want to leave it in the apartment alone," she admitted, a flush rising on her cheeks. "The lock on our front door is not very strong. And the building, sometimes things go missing. I thought it would be safer with me." Adrian studied her. He let his gaze travel over her, not with lewdness, but with a cold, analytical precision. He saw the cheap gray coat she had thrown over her scrubs, the fabric pilling at the sleeves. He saw the red, chapped skin of her hands, the nails cut short and clean but worn from scrubbing other people's floors. He saw the fatigue etched into the corners of her eyes, and the way those eyes shone with unshed tears, not for herself, but for the daughter she was terrified of disappointing. He had expected a hustle. He had expected a sob story designed to extract cash. But looking at her, he found only a terrified sincerity that was disarming in its rawness. She was not trying to manipulate him. She was simply trying to survive him. He looked back at the letter in his hand. The paper was cheap, the ink a standard blue ballpoint. He began to read aloud. "I will always find a way for us." He spoke the words in a low, measured tone, stripping them of the sentimentality she had written them with, turning them into a statement of fact to be examined. Nora's shoulders stiffened. A wave of heat washed over her face, hotter than the shame of poverty. That letter was private. It was a whisper from her heart to her child's heart, a shield she had constructed against the cold reality of their lives. Hearing it in the mouth of this stranger, this dangerous man who lived in a tower of glass, felt like a violation. "Please," she whispered, "do not read that." Adrian ignored her. He continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "You are my greatest gift." He lowered the paper slowly. The mockery she expected to hear was absent. Instead, there was a strange, vibrating tension in his voice. "You promise her hope," he said. "You promise her you will find a way." "Yes, you have nothing," he stated. It was not a question. It was an observation based on the evidence of her shoes, her coat, her desperation. "You are drowning, I can see it. So why lie to the child? Why give her a bracelet that will turn her wrist green and a book that is already falling apart?" Nora felt a spark ignite in her chest. It was a small, fierce thing, born of motherly instinct that overrode her fear of the Mafia Don standing before her. She straightened her spine, looking him dead in the eye. "Because she is 6 years old," Nora said. her voice gaining a quiet intensity that seemed to echo off the high ceilings. Because the world is already hard enough for her. She deserves to feel magic. She deserves to feel loved. Mr. Vascari, not punished because her mother is poor. The words hung in the air. Adrian flinched. It was microscopic, a mere tightening of the muscle in his jaw. But Nora saw it, not punished. The memory of Leo flashed in Adrian's mind. Leo, who had never done anything wrong, who had only wanted to see the Christmas lights, bleeding out on the cold concrete because of who his father was, because of who Adrian was. Leo had been punished for their sins. Adrian looked at the woman standing before him. She was shaking, terrified, and yet she stood her ground like a lioness protecting a cub. She possessed a kind of bravery he had not seen in his own soldiers, the bravery of someone with everything to lose. The anger drained out of him, replaced by an unsettling warmth that started in his chest and spread outward. It was an intrusive feeling, foreign and unwelcome. He did not want to admire her. He did not want to feel for her. He looked at the table where the bracelet and the book lay. He reached down and picked up the silver gift bag. He placed the book inside. He placed the bracelet inside. He folded the letter, careful to follow the original creases, and tucked it in. He held the bag out to her. "Take it," he said roughly. "Give it to her." Nora let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the bag. Her fingers brushed his for a fraction of a second. His skin was warm, dry, and shocking against her cold hand. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you." She turned to leave, clutching the bag to her chest like a rescued treasure. "Wait." The command stopped her in her tracks. She turned back. Adrian was holding the wooden ornament. The red ribbon dangled from his fingers. The name Emma, painted in white, stared back at them. "You are forgetting something," he said. Nora reached for it. "Oh, yes, thank you." Adrian pulled his hand back, keeping the ornament out of her reach. "No," he said. Nora blinked, confusion warring with relief. "Sir, I am keeping this," he said. "Keeping it, but it is for the tree. It is part of the gift. It is collateral," Adrian said. The corner of his mouth twitched. A dark, dangerous amusement flickered in his eyes. "To ensure you come back." "Come back," Nora repeated, her pulse spiking again. "Tomorrow night," Adrian said. "I have a personal matter. The tree. It is wrong. It is cold. You said it yourself. Christmas requires magic. My tree has none. You are going to help me fix it. I have a shift tomorrow," she stammered. "I know. You will work it here. With me." Nora bristled. Part of her wanted to snap at him, to tell him he had no right to hold her daughter's ornament hostage, to tell him to keep his job and his penthouse and leave her alone. But she looked at the ornament in his hand, the hours she had spent painting it, and then at his face. He looked challenging. Yes, but beneath the arrogance, there was something else, a challenge, a plea. She could not risk losing her job, and she could not leave Emma's name in the hands of this man without retrieving it. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "I will come back." "Good." Adrian took a step closer. He invaded her personal space, crossing the invisible boundary between employer and servant, between predator and prey. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. He smelled of expensive scotch, crisp winter air, and something darker, like burnt wood. Nora held her breath, looking up at him. She smelled of lemon dish soap and cheap vanilla lotion, a scent that was domestic, sweet, and utterly out of place in his sterile fortress. Adrian looked down at her. He could see the pulse fluttering in the hollow of her throat. He could see the way her teeth had bitten into her lower lip, leaving it pink and swollen. "Why do you bother?" he asked, his voice dropping to a murmur that was intimate and terrifying. "With the gifts, the lights, the lies. It is not a lie," she whispered. "It is," he countered. "Christmas is a lie. We tell ourselves to pretend the world is not a slaughterhouse. It is paint over rust." Nora shook her head slightly. She felt dizzy from his proximity, from the way his presence seemed to wrap around her. "It is not a lie to Emma," she said softly. "She believes in it. And as long as she believes, that is enough. That is real." Adrian stared at her. Their breath mingled in the space between them for a heartbeat. He wanted to tell her she was naive. He wanted to tell her that the world would break her daughter, just like it had broken him. But looking into her defiant, tired eyes, he found he could not say the words. "Go," he said abruptly. Stepping back, "Before I change my mind." Nora did not wait. She turned and walked to the elevator, her legs feeling like jelly. She pressed the button, clutching the silver bag so tight she could feel the sharp edges of the book through the paper. As the elevator doors slid open, she glanced back. Adrian was standing exactly where she had left him, watching her. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone, but his eyes were dark and stormy. The doors closed, severing the connection. Nora leaned back against the mirrored wall of the elevator and exhaled a shuddering breath. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt relieved. She had the gift back. She had survived. But she also felt unsettled. She replayed the way his eyes had darkened when she spoke about hope. She replayed the way he had stepped into her space, the sheer size of him, the controlled power in his movements. She was angry at herself for noticing how broad his shoulders were, how his shirt stretched across his chest. He was a criminal. He was dangerous. He was everything she taught Emma to avoid. And yet, for 1 second when he had handed her the bag, he had looked lost in the penthouse. Adrian remained motionless. He looked down at the ornament in his hand. He ran his thumb over the curve of the wood, tracing the white paint of the letters. It was rough, imperfect. It was real. He walked over to the massive, professionally decorated tree. It was a masterpiece of design, silver and blue, cold and perfect. He reached out and hung the cheap wooden disc on a branch at eye level. It swung gently, spinning slowly. Emma. He felt a pull in his chest, a strange gravity drawing him toward the woman who had just left. She had walked into his fortress with nothing but accidental honesty and had managed to crack the foundation. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed Marcus. "Boss?" Marcus answered on the first ring. "Run a check on Nora Lane," Adrian said, his eyes still fixed on the ornament. "A full check." "Sir? You think she is a threat?" "I think she is." "Something," Adrian murmured. "I want to know everything. Who she owes money to, where she lives, who the father is. Do it quietly. I do not want her to know." "Understood." Adrian hung up. He told himself it was for safety. He told himself he needed to know if she could be used against him, or if she was a plant. But as he poured himself another drink, looking out at the city lights that he hated, he knew he was lying. He just wanted to know who she was. The bus ride home was a blur of neon lights and slushy streets. Nora held the silver bag on her lap, her arms wrapped around it protectively. When she unlocked the door to her apartment, the air was stale and cold. The radiator clanked in the corner. "Mama?" Emma's sleepy voice came from the bedroom. Nora dropped her bag and the charity gift on the table and went into the bedroom. Emma was sitting up in bed, her hair messy, her eyes bright with the remnants of fever. "You are home," Emma chirped. Nora sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. She buried her face in Emma's neck, breathing in the scent of strawberries and childhood. She felt the small, fragile bones of her daughter's back. "I am home, baby," Nora whispered. She pulled back and looked at Emma. She thought of the mix-up. She thought of how close she had come to ruining everything. She thought of Adrian Vascari's cold eyes and the way he had held the ornament. "Wait here," Nora said. She went to the kitchen and retrieved the silver bag. She brought it back to the bedroom. "I know it is not Christmas yet," Nora said, her voice trembling. "But Santa came early. He knew you were sick, and he wanted you to have this now." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Nora handed her the bag. Emma tore into the tissue paper with clumsy, excited hands. She pulled out the book first. "The dragon book," she squealed, clutching it to her chest. "Mama, look, the princess and the dragon." "Open the rest," Nora said, wiping a tear from her cheek. Emma pulled out the bracelet. She gasped. It sparkled in the dim light of the bedside lamp. "It is silver," Emma whispered reverently, "like a queen." She held out her wrist, and Nora fastened the clasp. It was loose, sliding down to her hand, but Emma looked at it as if it were the Hope diamond. "Thank you." "Mama, thank you." "Santa." Nora found the letter at the bottom of the bag. She took it before Emma could see it. "This is for later," Nora said. She stood up and walked into the hallway, leaving Emma to flip through the pages of her book, the bracelet jingling softly. Nora leaned against the wall in the dark hallway. She unfolded the letter. The paper was slightly wrinkled where Adrian had held it. "I will always find a way." She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. Her knees pulled to her chest. She pressed the letter to her mouth to stifle a sob. She cried quietly, the hot tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. She cried for the fear of the last few hours. She cried for the relief of seeing Emma smile. And she cried because, for the first time in a long time, someone had really seen her. A dangerous, broken man in a tower had read her secret promise, and instead of destroying her, he had given it back. Upstairs, the city lights glowed cold and hard, but in the hallway, Nora Lane held her promise in her hands and let herself feel the weight of it. She would go back tomorrow. She had to. She had to get the ornament back. But deep down, in a place she wasn't ready to name, she knew that wasn't the only reason. The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt different this time, the night before. Nora Lane had been trembling with terror, expecting to be fired or worse. Tonight. The fear was still there, coiled tight in her stomach, but it was braided with a thread of anticipation she refused to name. She wore her best sweater, a soft cream knit she had found at a consignment shop 3 years ago. It was slightly worn at the elbows, but it was warm, and it made her feel less like a ghost in the machine of the Vascari Empire. When the doors slid open, the penthouse was quiet. The usual hum of the cleaning crew or the sharp footsteps of security guards was absent. The vast living room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the soft glow of the lamps flanking the massive fireplace. Adrian Vascari was waiting for her. He stood by the tree, his back to her. He had shed the armor of his suit jacket. He wore a white dress shirt, the top 2 buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were corded with muscle and marked by the faint white lines of old scars. "You are late," he said, without turning around. Nora checked her watch. It was 2 minutes past 7. "The bus was slow," she said, stepping into the room. "The snow is sticking to the roads." Adrian turned. His gaze swept over her, taking in the cream sweater, her jeans, her hair which she had left down tonight, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. He did not smile, but the hard line of his jaw seemed less brittle than the night before. He held up his hand. From his index finger dangled the wooden ornament. "Emma, you came back," he said. "You have my property," Nora replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Adrian walked over to the coffee table and set the ornament down gently, right next to a tumbler of amber liquid. "I do. And tonight, you earn it back." He gestured to the tree. It was exactly as it had been yesterday, towering, symmetrical, dressed in silver and icy blue. It was a masterpiece of cold perfection. "It is wrong," Adrian said, looking at the spruce with a look of genuine distaste. Nora frowned. "It is beautiful, sir. It looks like a magazine cover. That is the problem," he said. He picked up his drink and took a sip, the ice clinking softly. "It looks like a hotel lobby. It looks like a tax write-off. You said yesterday that Christmas requires magic. You said a family tree should not look like this." He waved a hand at the silver decorations. "I want you to fix it." Nora stared at him. "You want me to redecorate your Christmas tree?" "I want you to make it look like people actually live here," he corrected. "The staff brought up some boxes from storage. Old things. Things my mother bought before. They are over there." He pointed to several cardboard boxes stacked near the fireplace. They looked worn, their corners taped and retaped. Nora walked over to the boxes. She hesitated and opened the top one. Inside, wrapped in yellowing tissue paper, were ornaments of red and gold, glass baubles painted with scenes of snowy villages, and a string of old-fashioned multicolored lights. "These are lovely," she whispered, lifting a glass Santa Claus. Adrian watched her. He did not move to help. He simply stood there, a sentinel in his own home, drinking his whiskey. "Get to work." "Nora," he said, for the first hour. The silence was thick. Nora worked methodically, stripping the tree of its icy silver finery. She felt Adrian's eyes on her, a physical weight between her shoulder blades. He sat in the leather armchair, reviewing documents on a tablet, but every time she turned, he was looking at the tree, or at her. Gradually, the atmosphere shifted. The sheer domesticity of the task began to erode the tension. Nora dragged a small stepladder over to the tree to reach the higher branches. She began unspooling the string of multicolored lights Adrian had unearthed. "You missed a spot." Adrian's voice came from behind her. She jumped slightly, nearly dropping the strand. He was standing right at the base of the ladder, looking up. "Where?" she asked. "Top left. It is uneven." Nora stretched, trying to loop the wire over a particularly stubborn branch. The ladder was sturdy, but she was small, and the tree was massive. She rose onto her tiptoes, the rubber soles of her sneakers gripping the step. "Like this?" she asked, breathless from the exertion. "No, to the right." Nora leaned further. The ladder gave a tiny wobble on the polished marble floor. It happened in a heartbeat. The bulb she was holding flickered, startling her. Her foot slipped. She gasped, arms flailing as gravity took hold. She did not hit the floor. Strong hands clamped onto her waist, arresting her fall instantly. The impact knocked the breath out of her as she was pulled backward, not onto the hard stone, but against a wall of solid muscle. Nora froze. She was standing on the floor now, her back pressed flush against Adrian's chest. His hands were still on her waist, his thumbs digging into the soft wool of her sweater. His grip was ironclad, unyielding, and yet he wasn't hurting her. He was holding her. She could feel the heat radiating from him, searing through the layers of her clothes. She could feel the steady, rhythmic thud of his heart against her shoulder blades. "Careful," he murmured. His voice was a low rumble right next to her ear. His breath brushed against her temple, warm and scented with whiskey. Nora's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was acutely aware of every inch of contact, his chest against her back, his thighs brushing the back of hers, the size of his hands spanning her waist. I slipped," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know," he said. He did not let go. For a suspended moment, neither of them moved. The city lights twinkled outside, oblivious. The multicolored lights on the tree cast a warm, chaotic glow over them. The air was charged with something electric, something that tasted like danger and comfort all at once. Adrian's hands shifted slightly, his fingers spreading over her hips, testing the curve of her. It was possessive. It was protective. Then, slowly, he turned her around. Nora went willingly, her legs trembling too much to resist. They were face to face. He was so tall. Nora had to tilt her head back to look at him. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. Her hand came up instinctively to balance herself, resting flat against the center of his chest, beneath the crisp white cotton of his shirt. His heart was beating just as fast as hers. That realization shocked her. He was not stone. He was racing. Adrian looked down at her. His gaze was intense, searching. He looked at her eyes, wide and startled. He looked at the flush rising on her neck. Then, his eyes dropped to her mouth. He lingered there. Nora's lips parted on a shaky exhale. She saw his pupils dilate, swallowing the blue. The tension in his jaw softened, replaced by a hunger that made her knees weak. He leaned in, just a fraction of an inch. Then, abruptly, he stepped back. His hands fell from her waist. The loss of contact was so sudden it felt like a physical chill. Holiday hazards, he said. His voice was dry, sardonic, the armor slamming back into place. OSHA would have a field day with that ladder. Nora blinked, reeling. She laughed, a shaky, breathless sound that was too loud in the quiet room. Yes, she said, wrapping her arms around herself to hold the warmth in. Very dangerous. She turned back to the tree, her hands trembling as she picked up a red ornament. She tried to focus on the hook, on the branch, on anything but the man standing 3 feet away, but she could feel him. Every time she moved, she felt his gaze tracking her, heavy and hot. 30 minutes later, the tree was finished. It glowed with a chaotic, warm beauty, red, gold, green, and blue lights reflecting off the marble. It looked nothing like a corporate display. It looked like a memory. Adrian walked to the wet bar. "Drink?" he asked. I should not," Nora said. "I have to get home to Emma." "Just one," he said, to celebrate the lack of broken bones. He did not wait for an answer. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into his glass. Then he picked up a phone on the wall and pressed a button. "Kitchen. Send up a hot cocoa? Whipped cream. Yes, now." He hung up and turned to her. "Cocoa is on the way." Nora smiled, despite herself. "Thank you." They sat on the plush velvet sofa facing the window. The distance between them was respectable, but the air was still thick with the memory of his hands on her waist. When the cocoa arrived, delivered by a confused-looking housekeeper who vanished as quickly as she appeared, Nora wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "Why did you keep the old ornaments?" she asked softly. "If you hate the holidays so much." Adrian swirled his whiskey. He stared out at the city, his profile sharp against the glass. "I did not keep them," he said. "My housekeeper did. She has been with the family for 30 years. She packed them away after the funeral. I just never told her to throw them out." Nora watched him. "The funeral?" she repeated. Adrian took a long sip. "My father and my brother," he said. His voice was clipped, devoid of emotion, like he was reading a weather report. "Christmas Eve, 20 years ago." Nora's heart ached. She knew the stories. Everyone in Harborview knew the Vescari history, but hearing it from him, in this room, made it real. "Your brother," she said. "He was young? 12? Adrian said. His name was Leo. He liked cars. He liked noise. He was good." He turned the glass in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Christmas is not magic, Nora," he said, looking at her. "Christmas is a marker. It is the time of year when you count what you have and you realize what you have lost. It is the time when you realize there are things you cannot get back, no matter how much money you make or how many people you control." Nora set her cocoa down on the table. She turned her body toward him. "You do not have to pretend," she said gently. "Pretend what?" "Pretend that it does not hurt," she said. "You wear this armor. You act like you hate the lights because they are annoying, but you hate them because they remind you of him." Adrian looked at her. His eyes were dangerous, warning her to stop, but she pushed on. "It is okay to miss him. Adrian, it is okay to be sad. It does not make you weak. It makes you human." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. He should be angry. No one spoke to him like this. No one psychoanalyzed the Vescari boss in his own living room, but her voice was so soft, her eyes were so open, Ma. He set his glass down with a heavy thud. "Your letter," he said quietly. Nora blinked. "My letter? The one you wrote to your daughter." He said, "I will always find a way." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, clasping his hands together. "I read that letter, and I wanted to burn it." He admitted, because it sounded like him. It sounded like Leo. He always believed I could fix anything. He looked at me like I was a superhero. He looked at Nora. "You made me remember things I thought I had buried under 10 feet of concrete," he said, "and I hated you for it. But..." He trailed off. "But," Nora whispered. "But looking at that tree now," he said, nodding toward the glowing lights, "it does not feel as cold in here tonight." Silence stretched between them. It was heavy, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two lonely people recognizing each other in the dark. Nora felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing her toward him that had nothing to do with gratitude or fear. She stood up. She walked over to the window, needing to cool her face. The glass was cold against her forehead. Below, Harborview was a grid of gold and white. She heard him stand up. She heard his footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching her. He stopped right behind her. She could feel his body heat. A song drifted up from the floor below, probably a party in one of the other penthouses. Silent night. The irony was not lost on her. Adrian reached out. His hand came up slowly. His fingertips brushed against her cheek, tucking a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Nora's breath hitched. She froze. His knuckles grazed the skin of her jawline. His hand was rough, calloused from violence, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. She closed her eyes, leaning almost imperceptibly into his palm. "Adrian," she breathed. "Turn around," he whispered. Nora turned. He was right there. He was blocking out the world. The city lights formed a halo around him, but his face was in shadow. He looked down at her, searching her face for hesitation, for fear. He found none. He found only a raw, terrified longing that mirrored his own. He leaned closer. He hovered inches from her lips. He gave her the chance to run. He gave her the chance to push him away. Nora swallowed. She tipped her chin up. Her eyes flickered to his mouth. "Please," she whispered. It was permission. It was a plea. Adrian closed the gap. His lips met hers. It was not the violent, demanding kiss of a mafia don. It was slow. It was tentative. It was a question asked and answered in the language of breath and skin. His lips were warm and firm, moving against hers with a reverence that made her heart stutter. Nora let out a soft sound, a whimper of release. She reached up, gripping the front of his shirt, bunching the crisp white fabric in her fists. She pulled him closer. The kiss deepened. Adrian groaned low in his throat. His control snapped. His arms went around her, one hand sliding to the small of her back, pulling her flush against him until there was no air left between them. Their bodies fit together like puzzle pieces cut from the same wood. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. He tilted her head back, deepening the angle, taking the kiss from gentle to urgent. Nora's mouth opened under his. She tasted whiskey and desire. Her hand slid up his chest, over his shoulders, her fingers curling into the hair at the nape of his neck. They were drowning in it. The heat was overwhelming. A fire flash in the middle of winter. Adrian's thumb traced circles at her waist, his touch searing through her sweater. He pressed her backward, trapping her between his hard body and the cold glass of the window. For a moment, Nora forgot everything. She forgot the rent. She forgot the danger. She forgot that he was a man who killed people, and she was a woman who scrubbed toilets. There was only him, only this fire. Then, reality crashed back in. Emma? The image of her daughter's face flashed in her mind. Innocent, trusting, waiting for her. Nora gasped, pulling back. She broke the kiss. Breathless, her lips swollen and red, she pressed her hands against his chest, pushing him away. "No," she whispered. "No, I cannot." Adrian stopped instantly. He did not fight her. He did not try to hold her. He stepped back, his chest heaving, his eyes black with blown pupils. "I shouldn't," Nora stammered, her voice shaking. "I have a daughter. You are my boss. You are—" She didn't finish the sentence. "You are a killer." She looked at him, her eyes wide with conflict. She wanted him. God, she wanted him. But she could not afford to fall in love with a monster, no matter how gentle his hands were. Adrian looked at her. He saw the fear returning. He saw the walls coming back up. His chest ached. It was a physical pain, sharp and deep. He wanted to pull her back. He wanted to tell her that he would burn the world down to keep her safe. But he knew she was right. He was poison. He took a deep breath, forcing the predator inside him back into its cage. He ran a hand through his hair, smoothing his composure. "You are right," he said. His voice was rough, gravelly. He stepped back again, putting a safe distance between them. "You should go," he said. Before the buses stop running." Nora nodded, tears pricking her eyes. She grabbed her coat. She looked at him one last time. He stood by the window, outlined by the lights, alone again. "Good night, Adrian," she whispered. "Good night, Nora." She turned and fled. Adrian watched the elevator doors close. He turned back to the window, pressing his forehead against the cold glass where she had just been standing. He could still taste her on his lips. He looked at the tree, the warm, messy, beautiful tree she had built for him. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closed around the wooden ornament. Emma. He let her go tonight. But as he watched the single set of footprints appear in the snow on the sidewalk far below, Adrian Vascari knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going to let her go forever. The black sedan was waiting at the curb when Nora stepped out of her apartment building, the engine idling with a low, purring hum that vibrated in the cold December air. It was the third time in 4 days that the sleek vehicle had been there, a silent sentinel sent by Adrian Vascari, the driver, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk named Paolo, stepped out and held the door open. "Good afternoon, Miss Lane," he said, his voice gravelly but polite. "Mr. Vascari is expecting you." Nora hesitated on the sidewalk, clutching her worn handbag. The wind whipped her hair across her face, stinging her cheeks. This was becoming a pattern, a dangerous, intoxicating rhythm that she knew she should break, but she did not. She stepped into the warmth of the car, the leather seats smelling of cedar and expensive conditioning oil. Over the last few days, the pretext for these visits had shifted. At first, it was about the tree. Then, it was about organizing the penthouse for the holidays. Now, Adrian claimed he needed her perspective on a sudden philanthropic endeavor. He had decided, seemingly overnight, to fully fund a Christmas Eve gala for the St. Jude Community Center in the Heights, a neighborhood that had been neglected by the city and battered by poverty. He called it logistical consulting. Nora knew it was an excuse. As the car glided through the slush-covered streets of Harborview, Nora stared out the tinted window, battling the war inside her own chest. She was not naive. She knew what Adrian Vascari was. The rumors in the city were not fairy tales. They were warnings written in blood. He was a man who commanded fear, a man who lived in the shadows. And yet, the man she had come to know in the quiet hours of the evening did not match the monster people whispered about. The monster did not ensure that the kitchen staff had a mug of hot cocoa with extra whipped cream waiting for her when she arrived, simply because she had mentioned once that she loved it. The monster did not ask quiet, careful questions about Emma, what songs she was singing for the school pageant, what size shoe she wore, whether she preferred red or green. The monster did not listen, with a stillness that felt like reverence. When Nora spoke about the pain of being left behind by Emma's father years ago, her head told her to run. Her heart told her that for the first time in her life, she was not the one carrying the weight of the world alone. The penthouse was a sanctuary against the brewing storm outside. Heavy gray clouds were smothering the city skyline, turning the afternoon into a premature twilight. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, distorting the lights of Harborview into smeared streaks of gold and neon. Inside, it was warm. The Christmas tree Nora had redecorated glowed in the corner, a beacon of chaotic, colorful warmth amidst the sleek Italian furniture. Adrian was waiting for her at the large dining table, which was currently buried under blueprints, catering menus, and toy catalogs. He had shed his jacket and tie, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "You are here," he said, looking up as she entered. He did not smile, but the tension in his shoulders visibly unknotted. Nora walked over, placing her bag on a chair. "I am here, though I still do not know why you need me to choose between roast turkey and glazed ham. You have event planners for this." "My event planners think in terms of tax brackets and image management," Adrian said, sliding a menu toward her. "You think in terms of what a hungry family actually wants to eat on Christmas Eve. Choose." Nora looked at the options. Turkey, she said, decisive. It makes better leftovers. And for the toy drive? Adrian passed her a tablet. I had the team compile a list based on the demographics of the neighborhood. I want you to vet it. And he paused, clearing his throat, his gaze shifting to the window for a split second. I took the liberty of adding 2 names to the recipient list for the private distribution. Yours and Emma's. Nora froze. She looked at the list. There, at the bottom, marked for special allocation, were their names. Adrian, she started, her voice tight. I cannot accept charity from you. The job is enough. The bracelet was enough. It is not charity. He interrupted, his voice low and firm. It is logistics. You live in the district. You qualify. And if you try to argue with me, I will double the allocation just to be difficult. He looked at her then, and the hardness in his eyes was replaced by a challenge that was almost playful. Nora felt her defenses crumbling. She looked down at the table to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Shall we work? He asked. They worked for hours as the storm intensified outside. The wind howled around the tower, rattling the heavy glass panes, a reminder of the violent world that lay just beyond the perimeter of the penthouse. But in here, under the soft light of the chandelier and the glow of the tree, it felt safe. It was late, past 10 in the evening. The staff had long since retreated. The only sound in the vast room was the rustle of paper and the rhythmic drumming of the rain. Nora reached for a file folder containing the venue layout. At the exact same moment, Adrian reached for it too. Their hands collided. It was not a bump. It was a connection. His fingers brushed against the back of her hand, warm and rough. Nora stopped. Adrian stopped. Neither of them pulled away. The air in the room seemed to vanish, sucked out by the sudden spike in tension. The memory of their kiss from the other night, the one she had fled from, hung between them like a ghost. Nora looked up. Adrian was watching her. His eyes were dark, dilated, focusing on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He turned his hand over, sliding his palm against hers, interlacing their fingers slowly. The simple intimacy of the gesture, palm to palm, skin to skin, hit Nora harder than a shout. Why do you do this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why this event? Why me? Adrian looked at their joined hands. His thumb swept over her knuckles, tracing the dry skin. Because, he said, his voice rough, like stones grinding together. When you are here, when we are doing this, it feels less like a battlefield and more like something else. He could not finish the sentence. He did not have the vocabulary for peace. Nora felt a tear prick the corner of her eye. She squeezed his hand. I know, she admitted, her voice trembling. When I am with you, Adrian, I forget to be scared. I forget that I am tired. I just feel found. The confession hit him like a physical blow. A visible jolt went through his body. He stiffened, his grip on her hand tightening until it was almost painful. He stood up abruptly, pulling her up with him. The movement was fluid and powerful. He did not let go of her hand. He pulled her around the corner of the table. Nora stumbled slightly, breathless, until she was pressed against the edge of the heavy oak wood. Adrian stepped in. He caged her in, his body blocking out the room, blocking out the storm, blocking out everything but him. He did not touch her with his body yet, but he was everywhere. He towered over her, his breathing uneven. You should be scared, he rasped, his eyes searching her face frantically. You should be terrified of me. I am not, Nora whispered. That broke him. He reached out, his hand cupping her jaw, his fingers threading into her hair to hold her steady. His other hand landed on her hip, gripping the fabric of her sweater, his fingers flexing as if he were trying to anchor himself to the earth. He lowered his head and kissed her. This was not the gentle, tentative exploration of the other night. This was a collision. It was hot, desperate, and starving. It was the kiss of a man who had been cold for a lifetime and had finally found a fire. Nora gasped into his mouth, her hands flying up to clutch his shoulders. She felt the hard ridge of muscle beneath his shirt. She pulled him closer, needing to feel the weight of him. Adrian groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against her lips. He pressed closer, his hips pinning her against the table, eliminating the space between them. He was overwhelming, a force of nature. But Nora did not feel trapped. She felt consumed. Their mouths moved in sync, urgent and messy. He tasted of coffee and desire. She tasted of sweetness and hope. He broke the kiss to trail his lips down her jawline, pressing hot, open-mouthed kisses to the sensitive skin of her neck. Nora's head fell back, exposing her throat to him. She shivered, a tremor that ran from her scalp to her toes. Her fingers tightened in his shirt, bunching the fabric. Adrian, she breathed. He murmured her name against her skin, a rough prayer. Nora, Nora. He brought his face back to hers, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were squeezed shut, his lashes dark against his cheekbones. He was shaking. He moved his hand from her hip to the small of her back, pressing her firmly against him. The heat of him seared through her clothes. The moment brimmed with a profound tenderness that warred with the raw, masculine hunger radiating from him. They were teetering on a precipice, ready to fall. Buzz. The sound was sharp and jarring. Buzz, buzz. Adrian's phone, sitting on the table beside them, vibrated violently against the wood. The spell shattered. Adrian froze. For a second he did not move, his face buried in the curve of her neck. Then, the reality of the sound seemed to penetrate the haze of desire. He pulled back. His eyes were black, his pupils blown wide, but the softness was already retreating, replaced by a rigid, cold awareness. He reached out and snatched the phone. He looked at the screen. Marcus. He answered it, his voice dropping instantly into a tone Nora had never heard directed at her. Flat, lethal, and commanded. Talk. Nora straightened her clothes, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She watched him. Adrian listened. His jaw hardened until a muscle ticked in his cheek. His eyes, which moments ago had been filled with heat, turned into chips of ice. Where? He barked. He listened again. Lock it down, he ordered. I want a sweep of the perimeter. If they are within 5 blocks, I want to know. And find the leak. Tonight. He hung up. He did not look at Nora immediately. He stood with his back to her, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. Adrian? Nora whispered. He turned around. The man who had kissed her was gone. In his place stood the Dawn of Harborview. His face was a mask of stone. You need to go, he said. Nora blinked, the whiplash making her dizzy. What happened? My security chief spotted a vehicle. He said, his voice devoid of emotion. A rival crew, the Calvettis. They were scouting the building. Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Are we in danger? I am always in danger, Adrian said cold. That is the life, and you are standing in the middle of it. He walked past her, grabbing his jacket from the chair. He did not look at her. He could not. If he looked at her swollen lips, at the confusion in her eyes, he would not be able to do what he had to do. Marcus was right. There was a leak. Someone knew he was distracted. Someone knew his focus had shifted. And if the Calvettis knew he was soft, they would look for the reason why. They would look for her. He had to cut it out. He had to sever the limb to save the body. The car is downstairs, he said, turning his back to her to put on his jacket. Paolo will take you home. Do not come back tomorrow. Nora stepped forward. What? But the event. The tree. The event will proceed, Adrian said, snapping his cuffs into place. My staff will handle the rest. You are done here. Nora felt as though he had slapped her. 5 minutes ago, he had been worshipping her with his hands and his mouth. Now he was firing her? Adrian, please, she said, her voice shaking. I do not understand. Was it the kiss? It was a mistake, he said. He turned to face her. He forced his eyes to be dead. He forced his voice to be a blade. We blurred the lines. Nora, I let my guard down, and that is a luxury I cannot afford. You are a distraction. I cannot have distractions. A distraction. The word hung in the air, ugly and dismissive. Nora recoiled. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces of her dignity together. I see, she whispered. She looked at him. searching for the man who had held her. She saw the wall he had erected, but beneath the stone, deep in the blue of his eyes. She saw the scream. She saw the terror. He was lying. She knew it. He was doing this because he was scared for her. But the rejection still stung like acid. "I understand." "Mr. Vascari," she said, her voice hollow. She grabbed her bag. She walked to the elevator. She did not look back. Adrian stood in the center of the room, listening to the elevator doors close. As soon as she was gone, the mask crumbled. He slammed his fist onto the table, sending the stack of papers flying. He pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus back. "She is leaving now," Adrian said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I want a shadow detail on her. 2 cars, 24/7. If anyone gets within 50 feet of her or the girl, you put them in the ground. Do you understand?" "Yes, boss. And Marcus, sir, do not let her see you." The next day, Harborview was buried under 6 inches of fresh snow. The city looked clean, white, and innocent. Nora went through the motions of her life like a sleepwalker. She made Emma breakfast. She walked her to the bus stop. She went to her shift at the diner. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped, hoping it was him. It never was. She tried to tell herself it was for the best. He was a criminal. He was dangerous. He had used her and discarded her. But she remembered the way he had said Nora against her neck. By late afternoon, the winter sun was already dipping below the horizon. Nora stood at the bus stop near Emma's school, stomping her feet to keep warm. Other parents were huddled in coats, chatting about holiday plans. The school bus squealed to a halt. The doors opened, and a flood of children in colorful parkas poured out. Emma ran toward her, waving a drawing. "Mama, look, it is a reindeer." Nora crouched down, forcing a smile. "It is beautiful, baby." A masterpiece. She took Emma's hand, and they began the walk back to their apartment, across the street, parked in a gray sedan that had seen better days. A man sat behind the wheel. He wore a heavy coat and a beanie pulled low. He held a phone up. The camera lens pointed through the passenger window. Click. He took a photo of Nora laughing at something Emma said. Click. He took a photo of Emma skipping in her pink boots. He lowered the phone and typed a text message. "Target acquired, the woman and the kid. Confirming the address now." He hit send. Nora paused at the corner, frowning. She felt a prickle on the back of her neck, that ancient instinct that told a prey animal it was being watched. She turned around, scanning the street. She saw the line of cars, the people walking their dogs, the gray sedan idling at the curb. "What is it, Mama?" Emma asked, tugging on her hand. Nora looked at the sedan. The windows were tinted dark. She could not see inside. "Nothing. Sweet pea," Nora said, tightening her grip on Emma's small hand until Emma squirmed. "Come on, let us go home. I will make cocoa." She walked faster, pulling Emma along. Inside the gray sedan, the man watched them go. A nasty smile curled his lips. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Vascari," he muttered. The St. Jude Community Center was nothing like the polished, sterile ballrooms Adrian Vascari usually inhabited. The paint on the walls was chipped in places, hidden behind streamers of red and green crepe paper. The air did not smell of expensive perfume and champagne. It smelled of warm apple cider, pine needles, and damp wool. It was crowded, noisy, and chaotic. And for the first time in 20 years, Adrian did not hate it. He stood near the back of the hall, flanked by Marcus and 2 other security guards who were trying very hard to look like festive volunteers. Adrian wore a thick wool coat over a simple sweater, blending in as much as a man like him could. He scanned the room, not for threats, though he was always looking for those, but for her. The doors opened, letting in a swirl of snow and cold air. Nora Lane stepped inside, holding Emma's hand. Adrian felt the air leave his lungs. She was wearing a dress of deep forest velvet, long-sleeved and modest, but cut in a way that skimmed her figure with an elegance that belonged on a magazine cover. She had told him her friend at the diner had found it at a thrift shop. That was a lie. Adrian had seen the dress in a boutique window 3 days ago, bought it, and paid Nora's friend $500 to deliver it and play along. Her hair was down, curled loosely around her face. catching the light of the string lights draped across the ceiling. She looked soft. She looked radiant. She looked like the only real thing in the world beside her. Emma was a bundle of energy in a puffy pink coat and the silver bracelet he had returned to them. Her eyes went wide as she saw the decorations. The massive tree in the center of the room, the tables piled high with food, the station where volunteers were handing out wrapped gifts. "Mama, look!" Emma squealed, pointing at the tree. "It is huge." Adrian pushed off the wall. He ignored Marcus's warning glance. He walked through the crowd, the sea of people parting instinctively for him. Nora was kneeling to unzip Emma's coat when she sensed him. She froze, then looked up. Her eyes met his. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of the hurt he had inflicted the night before when he sent her away. But beneath the guard, he saw the relief. She had missed him. The realization hit him harder than a bullet. "Hello?" "Nora," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Nora stood up. She smoothed the front of her velvet dress. "Hello." Adrian, she looked at him. Really looked at him, searching for the cold boss who had dismissed her. She did not find him. She found the man who had kissed her against a table while the storm raged outside. "You came," she said softly. "I am paying for it," he said, a corner of his mouth lifting in a ghost of a smile. "I should probably make an appearance." He looked down at Emma. The little girl was staring up at him with unabashed curiosity. She did not know who he was. She only knew he was the tall man looking at her mother like she was a queen. Adrian crouched down. He did not care that the floor was wet with melted snow. He brought himself to eye level with the child. "Hello?" "Emma," he said gently. Emma blinked. "Hi, are you Santa's helper?" Adrian laughed, a low, genuine sound that startled Nora. "Something like that." He said, "Is the bracelet holding up?" Emma gasped. She held out her wrist. "It is! Look, it sparkles!" "It certainly does," Adrian said seriously. He looked at Nora, his blue eyes softening. "You look beautiful." "Nora." Nora felt her breath hitch. "Thank you," she whispered, "and thank you for all of this. For the food, for the gifts, these families. They have never had a Christmas like this." "It is just logistics," Adrian said, repeating his excuse from the day before. But the lie held no weight now. For a moment, they stood there, a small island of calm in the swirling, festive chaos. Nora watched him with her daughter. She saw the way his large, dangerous hands were careful not to frighten the child. She saw the way he listened when Emma started rambling about the reindeer drawings she had made. Her defenses cracked. The wall she had built after he rejected her crumbled into dust. This was the man he could be. This was the man he was, underneath the armor. Suddenly, the hair on the back of Adrian's neck stood up. It was a shift in the air pressure, a ripple of disturbance in the crowd near the south entrance. Adrian stood up slowly, his body shifting instantly from relaxed to lethal. He scanned the room over Nora's head. Marcus caught his eye from across the hall. He gave a subtle nod, his hand moving to his jacket. Trouble. Adrian's eyes narrowed. He saw them. 3 men in heavy overcoats pushing through the crowd of families. They were not looking at the tree. They were looking at Nora, the Calvettis. They had found the leak, or they had followed her. It did not matter. They were here. "Nora," Adrian said, his voice low and urgent. "Take Emma. Move behind the tree, now." Nora looked at his face. The warmth was gone, replaced by a terrifying focus. She did not ask questions. She grabbed Emma's hand. "Come on, baby," Nora said, her voice tight. As they turned, one of the men in the coat saw them. He reached into his coat. "Gun!" Someone screamed. The festive noise shattered into panic. People screamed, diving for cover. Ornaments crashed to the floor. Adrian did not hesitate. "Get down," he roared. He lunged toward Nora and Emma. He grabbed them, using his own weight to propel them forward, shoving them behind a heavy display table piled high with canned goods. A pop rang out, loud, sharp, unmistakable. A bullet shattered a glass star on the tree above their heads. Adrian slammed into the floor beside them, covering their bodies with his own. He pressed Nora's head down. "Stay down, do not move," he commanded. Emma started to cry, a high, terrified sound. Adrian shifted, placing his hand on the back of the child's head, stroking her hair. "It is okay," he murmured, his voice surprisingly steady amidst the screaming. "I have you! I have you!" He looked over the edge of the table. The three men were fanning out, using the chaos of the fleeing crowd as cover. They were coming for the display. They wanted leverage. They wanted the woman and the kid to make Adrian bleed. Adrian looked at Nora. She was pale, shaking, clutching Emma to her chest. She looked at him, her eyes wide with terror, but she was not looking at the gunman. She was looking at him. "Trust me," he said. "I do," she whispered. Adrian made a choice. If he stayed here, pinned down, a stray bullet would hit one of them. He was the target. If he moved, the fire would follow him. He looked at his life, the power, the money, the tower, the darkness, and then he looked at the two people huddled on the dirty floor of a community center. There was no choice at all. "Marcus," Adrian shouted into his radio earpiece, "cover the display. Get them out the back." He stood up. He stepped out from behind the cover, fully exposing himself to the gunman. "Hey," he bellowed, his voice cutting through the panic. "Over here." The three gunmen turned toward him. Adrian sprinted. He ran away from the display, away from Nora and Emma, drawing the line of fire toward the east exit. 2 shots rang out. One tore through the sleeve of his coat. He did not slow down. He crashed through the emergency doors into the snowy alleyway. The cold air hit him like a slap. He pulled his phone from his pocket as he ran. He dialed a number he had saved for a day he thought would never come. "Detective Miller," he panted, ducking behind a dumpster as a bullet sparked off the brick wall above him. "Vascari?" the voice on the other end answered. Confused. "I am done," Adrian said. "I am cashing in." "What?" "The Calvetti crew. They are at the St. Jude Center. And you can have my files. The shipping routes, the laundering, everything." There was a stunned silence on the line. "You are giving up your own operation?" "I am buying a ticket out," Adrian snarled, returning fire with the small pistol he had drawn from his ankle holster. "I want protection. For me. And for a woman and a child. Total immunity. New identities if we need them. But it ends tonight. Done," the detective said. "Units are already rolling." Adrian dropped the phone in the snow. He stood up, hands raised, as sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every second. The gunmen in the alley froze, realizing they were trapped. Adrian Vascari, the king of Harborview, sank to his knees in the snow. He felt lighter than he had in 20 years. An hour later, the community center was a scene of controlled chaos. Police lights flashed blue and red against the snow. Adrian sat on a metal folding chair in a quiet side room. He had given his statement. He had signed the papers. His lawyer was screaming in the hallway, but Adrian was not listening. The door flew open. Nora burst in. She was disheveled, her velvet dress stained with dust, her hair wild. "Adrian," she rushed to him. She did not care about the police officer standing by the door. She fell to her knees between his legs, her hands flying over his chest, his arms, his face. "Are you hurt?" she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "I saw the hole in your coat." "Are you hit?" "I'm fine," Adrian said. He caught her hands. "Nora, stop. I am fine. It is just a scratch." Nora collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his nose in her hair. He breathed her in, fear, smoke, and vanilla. "Emma?" he asked. "She is with the paramedics," Nora sobbed. "She is fine. She's eating a cookie. Marcus is with her." Adrian closed his eyes. "Good, good." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "It is over, Nora," he said. His voice was a rough whisper. "What is over? Me," he said. "The business, the life. I gave it up." Nora blinked. Confusion warring with the adrenaline. "What do you mean?" "I traded it," he said. "The evidence for our safety. I am not the boss anymore. I am just a witness. A man with a target on his back for a while, but a free man." Nora stared at him. "You gave up everything? Your empire? Your money?" Adrian reached out and wiped a smudge of dirt from her cheek. I looked at you, he said. I looked at Emma crying behind that table, and I realized that if I kept the power, I would lose you. And that was not an option. Nora's chin trembled. You did that for us? I did that for me, he corrected gently, because I do not want to be the man who hates Christmas anymore. I want to be the man who puts the star on the tree for you. Nora let out a wet, shaky laugh. She grabbed the lapels of his ruined coat and shook him slightly. If you are serious, Adrian Vascari, she said fiercely, if this is real, then you have to promise me. No more looking back. No more darkness. You have to commit to this, to the lights, to the messy, loud, broke life of being a real person. I promise, he said. I do not want a temporary hero, she warned. I want you. You have me, he vowed. You have all of me. Nora surged forward. She kissed him. It was not tentative. It was not polite. It was a reclaiming. It was an outpouring of relief and terror and love that had nowhere else to go. Adrian groaned, his hands coming up to cradle her face, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning universe. He kissed her slow and reverent at first, tasting the salt of her tears, and then deeper, pouring every ounce of his regret and his hope into her mouth. She pressed closer, her fingers threading through his dark hair, pulling him down. They clung to each other, both trembling from the aftershocks of the violence, breathing each other's air. In the corner of the room, a small plastic Christmas tree sat on a filing cabinet, its single string of lights blinking steadily. Adrian broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. Merry Christmas. Nora, he whispered. Merry Christmas. Adrian 2 years later. The house was small. It was a bungalow in a quiet suburb, miles away from the skyline of Harborview. It had a porch that needed painting and a driveway that needed shoveling. Inside, the fire was roaring in the brick fireplace. The room smelled of cinnamon rolls and pine. It was Christmas morning. Adrian Vascari stood by the window, coffee mug in hand. He wore flannel pajama pants and a t-shirt. He looked tired. He had been up since 5 a.m. building a dollhouse, but he looked younger. The hard lines of stress around his eyes had smoothed out. Snow was falling softly outside, coating the world in silence. Daddy, look! He turned. Emma, now 8 years old and missing a front tooth, was tearing the wrapping paper off a large box. It is the chemistry set, she screamed. Adrian grinned. Careful with the explosions, kid. Nora walked in from the kitchen, carrying a tray of cinnamon rolls. She wore his oversized shirt and thick wool socks. She looked happy. She looked peaceful. She set the tray down and walked over to him. He puts his arm around her, pulling her into his side. She rested her head on his shoulder. Did you start the coffee? She asked. Way ahead of you, he said, kissing the top of her head. He reached into his pocket. I have one more thing, he said. He pulled out a small, worn wooden ornament. The paint was chipped and the ribbon was frayed, but the name Emma was still bright white. He had kept it safe in a velvet box for 2 years. He walked over to the tree, a real Douglas fir, slightly lopsided, covered in paper snowflakes and mismatched glass bulbs. Emma stopped playing with her chemistry set. She watched him. Adrian found a spot right in the center, at eye level. He hung the ornament. It spun slowly, catching the light of the fire. He turned back to them. Nora smiled, her eyes shining. Adrian walked back to her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. He was not a king anymore. He was not a boss. He was just a man with a mortgage, a hardware store business, and a family. And he had never been richer. He leaned down and kissed Nora, a soft, lingering pressure that promised forever. Merry Christmas, he murmured against her lips, and this time, looking at the imperfect, chaotic, beautiful life they had built, Adrian Vascari knew it was not a lie. Thank you so much for listening to The Mafia Boss Hated Christmas Until a Broke Single Mother Put the Wrong Gift Under His Tree. I hope this story brought a little warmth to your day and reminded you that even the coldest hearts can be thawed by the right person. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment down below telling me which country or city you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, Please make sure to subscribe to the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an upload. And do not forget to share your thoughts on Adrian and Nora's journey in the comments section. Did you like how it ended? Let me know. Until next time, keep believing in a little bit of magic.